Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 294 in the co-main event, we are getting Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev at middleweight after Paulo Costa was forced to withdraw with staph infection in his elbow. Now, Dana White has come out and said that the winner of Usman versus Chimaev will be the #1 contender in the middleweight division, essentially saying Sean Strickland's first title defense will be against the winner of Usman versus Chimaev, barring injury. And that's had a lot of fans pouring with outcry saying, well, what about Du Plessis? What about Dricus Du Plessis? He's earned the title fight. Why isn't he getting the title fight? I'm here to tell you that the winner of Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev deserves a middleweight title fight more than Dricus Du Plessis based on recent fan logic regarding a litany of other title fights that have been booked over the past couple months. And I'm going to call out the hypocrisy of that. And believe me, I have countless examples. So if you go back to UFC 290, Dricus Du Plessis versus Robert Whittaker, it's known this is a #1 contender fight. And Dricus Du Plessis, nobody even expected him to win, but he goes out there and literally wrecks Robert Whittaker in the second round, TKOs him. And we're like, okay, he didn't take any damage in this fight for the most part. We're getting Israel Adesanya versus Du Plessis next. They even trotted in Israel Adesanya for the in-cage stare down. So it looks like, oh, it's a foregone conclusion. Well, unfortunately, the UFC had already kind of targeted UFC 293, which was early in September, for Israel Adesanya's next title defense. Well, how does that line up? Because that's essentially 2 months after UFC 290. Typically, fighters like a 2-month training camp, so Du Plessis has to immediately jump back into another training camp without being able to heal up any pre-existing injuries and turn around to fight for a title. Well, I already knew once it wasn't announced very shortly after the event. I said, I have a feeling this isn't happening. Du Plessis comes out and says, I have a foot injury. I'm not fighting at UFC 293. And the UFC decides to put Israel Adesanya versus Sean Strickland as the headliner for 293. And at the time, I was highly critical of the UFC for doing this because I felt like they mismanaged the division by making poor decisions that led to us getting Adesanya versus Strickland instead of Adesanya versus Du Plessis, which at the time, everyone wanted Adesanya versus Du Plessis. But a lot of fans kind of defended the decision. Oh, well, they needed Adesanya as the headliner for 293. They should have made better decisions. They knew that this card was going to be in September. They knew it was going to happen like in February or March. They should have booked Du Plessis versus Whittaker a couple weeks later. They should have made UFC 293 a couple weeks later. They would have been able to avoid this. And truly, it should have been Israel Adesanya versus Du Plessis at UFC 293. They just made bad decisions, and Sean Strickland gets an undeserved title shot. And a lot of people defended that. I said, no, it shouldn't be Sean Strickland. I don't care what the UFC has to do. It's not like Du Plessis out for a long time. They should have found a way to make Israel Adesanya versus Du Plessis. But for whatever reason, fans defended it. They said, you know what? Du Plessis can just fight the winner. Well, then you actually have UFC 293, and Adesanya loses to Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland just shocks the world to become middleweight champion. The second that decision was read, I said, you know what? Dricus Du Plessis isn't getting the next title shot. It's either going to be Israel Adesanya an immediate rematch, or if Khamzat Chimaev beats Paulo Costa at UFC 294, it will be Khamzat Chimaev getting the next title fight. Now, obviously, Costa has since pulled out, and now it's Kamaru Usman. But sure enough, this fight is announced. Dana White comes out and says, #1 contender fight, Usman versus Chimaev. And he may be selling wolf tickets. I do not believe he's selling wolf tickets. I believe that the winner of Usman versus Chimaev, barring some long-term injury, will fight for the belt next, and Du Plessis will have to fight someone else. But then you look at, what are some other recent title fight announcements? Well, you look at UFC 295 in November, just a couple weeks away from the time I'm recording this video. You have John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Stipe Miocic in no way, shape, or form deserves a title fight right now. He hasn't fought in coming up on 3 years, and in his last fight, he got folded like a lawn chair by Francis Ngannou. In no way, shape, or form does Stipe Miocic deserve a title shot. But what are fans saying? Oh, well, he's the heavyweight GOAT. Oh, well, you know, the John Jones versus Stipe Miocic fight's a bigger fight because Stipe Miocic is a more known name. Because you look at the actual division right now, and Sergey Pavlovich deserves the heavyweight title fight. That's based on merit. Pavlovich deserves the fight. He's an exciting fighter. He's on a 6-fight winning streak. He knocked out Curtis Blades in his last fight. And Sergey Pavlovich should be getting the title fight. But instead, fans are saying, oh, well, Stipe's the bigger name. Stipe's the GOAT. And I'm so tired of the Stipe's the GOAT argument. Stipe's the GOAT. Okay, he was the GOAT. He still is technically the GOAT. But that's years ago. You're talking about a condition of Stipe from years ago. He's not still the GOAT. That's like saying, oh, Anderson Silva deserves a middleweight title shot right now because he's the GOAT. No, he's not, because he's still technically the GOAT in terms of history, but not right now. His skill set isn't, it's not like he's prime GOAT status right now. That's what I'm trying to say. And instead, you're having like this Uncle Rico moment of, well, Stipe Miocic won this fight and that fight, and he deserves it. No, he sat out for 2.5 years, coming up on 3 years. He got destroyed in his last fight in a title fight. In no world does he deserve a title shot, but fans defend that. Then you look at UFC 296, which I've talked about this ad nauseum. You have Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington for the welterweight title. Colby Covington in no way, shape, or form deserves a welterweight title fight. He is 2-2 in his last 4 fights. Those 2 losses against Kamaru Usman for the title. One he got finished in, the other one he lost by decision. You look at his overall UFC resume, guess what? He doesn't have a win over a current top 15 ranked opponent. And people can say, oh, well, if you look at previous opponents, they were ranked when he beat them. Again, you're pulling an Uncle Rico moment. Oh, if coach would have put me in 4th quarter, we would have took States. I don't care that Colby Covington has a win over RDA back in, 1999. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And then you have the number one argument, which we're going to get to a little bit later in this video and get more in depth in it. Oh, well, Colby Covington's a draw. All that Family Dollar trash talk he has, Colby Covington's a draw. He's a pay-per-view draw. That's why he deserves a title fight. And you have people just regurgitating these talking points over and over and over again. Oh, well, he had close fights with Usman. Oh, he's a draw. Meanwhile, you have multiple other fighters in the division that deserve a welterweight title shot. You have Bilal Muhammad, but fans say, oh, Bilal Muhammad's boring. He doesn't deserve a title fight. Bilal Muhammad's on a 9-fight winning streak, and his last 3 or 4 opponents are still ranked in the top 10. You have Shavkat Rakhmonov, who's undefeated every single one of his fights. He's won via finish. In his last fight, he got a big win over Jeff Neal. I think Shavkat Rakhmonov deserves a title fight more than Colby Covington, who's coming off a win over retired Jorge Masvidal, whose last win before that was against Tyron Woodley. Horrible title fight, undeserved title fight. But again, fans don't care because it's Colby Covington or Bilal Muhammad or even Shavkat, which people really haven't discussed because he's fighting Wonderboy Thompson. Then you have a hypothetical bantamweight title fight taking place in 2024. It may happen at 298, 299, maybe even 300. You have Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera 2. And the number one contender is clear-cut. It should be Merab Dvalishvili. Merab is on a 9-fight winning streak currently. And I keep hearing people say, well, the O'Malley versus Vera fight's a much bigger fight because you have the storyline of the first fight where Marlon Chito Vera brutally chopped his leg, shucked him to the ground, flash KO'd him with brutal ground and pound elbows, and then you had O'Malley stretchered out of the cage with no serious injuries, and you have O'Malley saying that fight was a fluke. And now you have Marlon Vera, who wins one fight against Pedro Munoz. It was a close fight. And now all of a sudden he's getting a title fight. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. He has 1-1 in his last 2 fights. 2 fights ago, he was dominated by Corey Sandhagen. But people say, oh, well, this is a great narrative. We have a great storyline here. It's going to draw more pay-per-view buys. It's a better fight. Merab's boring. We don't like Merab. Well, Merab is clear-cut number one contender based on a meritocracy. And I understand that the UFC is not always a meritocracy, and it's never really been a meritocracy, but to a certain extent, there's a gray area sometimes where some guys might get preferential treatment, but these are decisions that have been made that are so egregious. They're just so undeserved. You're literally giving 3 guys who don't in any realm or possibility deserve a title shot based on merit. They're all getting title shots, and you have fans defending them because guess what? People like it when it's fighters they like getting preferential treatment. People like it when fighters get title fights they don't deserve as long as they're a fan of that fighter. But if they don't like that fighter, all of a sudden it's a big deal. So now all of a sudden you have people who like Dricus Du Plessis saying, well, Dricus Du Plessis deserves a title fight. And I'll tell you what this is really about. Honestly, what this really is about, I think it's about Kamaru Usman. A lot of fans don't like Kamaru Usman. They can't fathom the fact of Kamaru Usman potentially getting a title fight over Dricus Du Plessis. Now, I still think people would rather have Du Plessis get the title fight over Khamzat Chimaev, but I think they'll be a lot more forgiving if Khamzat Chimaev wins and he gets the title fight. If Khamzat goes out there and starches Kamaru Usman, I think a lot of the criticism will go away. But it's just crazy to me that merit only matters. The outcry only matters when it's a fighter you like getting undercut by the UFC. The UFC has done this time and time again. They are vindictive towards fighters. And half the time, the MMA fan base cheerleads it and they applaud it and they say, oh, we don't care about Bilal's 9-fight winning streak. Let's give it to a guy who's on a 1-fight winning streak, who's 2-2 in his last 4 fights. Let's give it to Stipe Miocic, who literally got brutally KO'd in his last fight, folded like a lawn chair. Let's give it to him because he's got the bigger name. Oh, let's give it to Marlon Vera because that's the funner fight for Sean O'Malley. I don't like the way Merab fights. But when it's a fighter they like now getting skipped over because of the UFC's ruthless tactics and vindictive ability where they go against fighters who do things they don't like that Dricus Du Plessis turned the fight down. They don't like that he turned the fight down, so they want to skip over him and they want to say, you know what, Dricus, you fight someone else. They're going to make him fight someone else. I don't know who that'll be, but they're going to make him fight someone else. And the constant, oh, well, this guy's a draw, that guy's a draw. Why does it only matter when it comes to certain fighters you don't like? Oh, Merab's not a draw, or Bilal's not a draw, or Sergey Pavlovich not a draw, which people don't talk about Pavlovich as much. But you look at Colby Covington, they say Colby Covington's a draw. Let's go over some details right now. Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal did under 400,000 pay-per-view buys. That was reported by the Sports Business Review Journal. I will link that down in the description. You can find that. That is a credible source. Well, oh, he sold under 400,000 pay-per-view buys? Well, what about Kamaru Usman? Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal, both times. One sold 1.3 million pay-per-view buys. The other one sold 700,000 buys. Kamaru Usman is a more proven draw than Colby Covington. So my point is, Kamaru Usman is a proven draw. Guess who's not? Dricus Du Plessis is not a proven draw by any way, shape, or form. So based on that logic, well, I guess Kamaru Usman deserves it because he's a draw. He's more of a proven draw than Dricus Du Plessis, so he deserves a title fight. Khamzat Chimaev he's not really a proven draw just yet, but you can see that it's there. I believe Khamzat Chimaev will be a substantial pay-per-view draw. He hasn't headlined a pay-per-view yet. He was supposed to headline against Nate Diaz, but you can see if Khamzat Chimaev continues to win, if he wins against Kamaru Usman, I believe he will be propelled to superstardom in the UFC. And I believe if Khamzat can continue to win, I think the UFC knows this as well. I think the fans know this as well. If Khamzat Chimaev continues to win, I think he'll be headlining some big pay-per-views. And those pay-per-view sales, I think if he wins another 2-3 fights, if he becomes champion, I think he'll be selling over 1 million pay-per-view buys. So Khamzat Chimaev is a bigger draw than Dricus Du Plessis. So why aren't we giving Khamzat Chimaev a title fight? Why aren't we giving him a title fight? Who cares? Oh, Khamzat Chimaev, is coming up to middleweight and getting a first decent win against a guy who's not even middleweight. Because that's what people are going to say. Oh, well, Khamzat Chimaev beats Kamaru Usman on 10 days' notice. Kamaru Usman's a career welterweight. Oh, well, Kamaru Usman beats Khamzat Chimaev, who's not even ranked at middleweight, and now he's getting a title shot. People are going to say it doesn't make sense. Well, just come back to it. Kamaru Usman, Khamzat Chimaev are bigger draws than Dricus Du Plessis. And the point I'm making with this is the outright hypocrisy. It only matters when a fighter is getting an undeserved title fight when you don't like that fighter or you prefer another fighter over them. For me personally, I always want title shots based on meritocracy. I want Dricus Du Plessis to get the title shot. I want Belal Muhammad to get the title shot. I want Merab Dvalishvili to get the title shot. I want merit-based title shots. And I understand it's not always going to be clear-cut or concrete, but we should at least have some type of monicum of merit when it comes to title shots. And I keep hearing fans saying, oh, well, this guy's a draw. Nobody likes this. Nobody wants to see him fight. It doesn't matter. He deserves it more than the other guy. And now we're only crying because, oh, well, Dricus might get passed up for Kamaru Usman or Khamzat Chimaev. It is craziness to me. And I've talked about it time and time again. When the fans, when the MMA media let Dana White and the UFC get away with giving out undeserved title shots with very little backlash or even a lot of cheerleading, they will continue to go down that slippery slope. They will continue to do it more and more and more. And this is something that has become exasperated over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I've seen it get worse and worse and worse. It has never been a full-fledged 100% meritocracy. But over the years, the UFC is like, okay, we're going to do this, and it really doesn't make sense, and it's undeserved. And the fans are like, oh, okay, it's not that bad. There's a little bit of backlash. And then they slowly just kept creeping down that slippery slope. And then meanwhile, you got them booking fights like Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera. Now, full disclosure, that's not official booked yet, but it's looking like it. And people are cheerleading that. Oh, we don't want Merab to get a title fight. Well, Merab is clear-cut #1 contender right now. And they make up the fake narrative about, oh, he didn't want to fight Aljamain Sterling. At no point in time Was Merab the #1 contender when Aljamain Sterling did not have a title fight? Merab became the #1 contender in March. Aljamain Sterling already had fights booked against Henry Cejudo and then Sean O'Malley. They were already full-gone conclusions. He never held up the division. They make up these fake stories. Or, oh, Bilal Muhammad, he already fought Leon and he lost. No, it was a no contest and it literally lasted, what, 2 rounds? It does not matter. But all of a sudden, when a fighter you like is now getting passed up because the UFC being vindictive, all of a sudden it's a massive deal and we have to have this outcry. So just to sum this up, the UFC keeps getting away with this. It's going to get worse and worse. Next thing you know, they're going to be giving WWE wrestlers title shots. They're going to be giving CM Punk's title shots. They're going to be bringing in different guys, old celebrities. They're going to be giving them title shots. As you creep down this slippery slope, if there's not fan backlash, they will continue to do this because they'll get away with it. And at the end of the day, they're going to make more money based on it. So people should really be showing backlash when the UFC gives out undeserved title shots. It shouldn't only be when a fighter you like is getting surpassed because, oh, the UFC wants to be vindictive because they turned down a title fight. I absolutely hate that the UFC has slowly become the WWE in terms of, oh, well, this guy's a bigger draw. This guy's got a better personality, so we're going to give him a title shot. And that is the case. Kamaru Usman and Khamzat Chimaev are proven draws compared to Dricus Du Plessis. So based on that logic, I don't want to hear anybody's complaining about it. If you didn't complain about Colby getting a title shot, if you didn't complain about Marlon Chito Vera potentially getting a title shot, if you didn't complain about Stipe Miocic getting a title shot, I don't want to hear you complain about Usman or Chimaev getting the next middleweight title fight. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.